Good morning. Today on Spotlight, part one of our two-part series of up-close interviews with the four candidates running for seats on the Michigan Supreme Court for your November 5th general election ballot. Both major political parties are aiming to have control of the state's highest court. It is widely believed that the Democratic-backed justices have a slight 4-3 majority on the bench. Incumbent Kyra Harris Bolden and attorney Kimberly Ann Thomas are running as a judicial team. They'll be our guests today. And next week, we'll introduce you to their challengers, State Representative Andrew Fink and Circuit Court Judge Patrick William O'Grady. They will be featured as well. In the interest of fairness, all four interviews have already been done. That way, no candidate has an advantage over the other as we begin the broadcast of these recorded programs. It's Sunday, October the 20th. I'm Chuck Stokes, and this is Spotlight. The race for Michigan's Supreme Court, one of our topics today on Spotlight, and two members who are interested in getting in those seats, in your case, staying in that seat. We'll talk about that today on Spotlight. And you've got about 30 seconds to tell me in a nutshell why you should be on the Michigan Supreme Court. What would you say, Justice Bolden?
Yes, well, first, thank you for having me. What I would say is I have had the pleasure of serving on the Michigan Supreme Court for almost 2 years now. We've done great work. I've authored 8 majority opinions. But other than that, a lot of people don't realize the great impact it has in our judiciary in general. I sit on the treatment court task force as well as child welfare. And those are instrumental to making sure that we have pathways that are not incarceration, and to make sure that our children and our welfare system are taken care of. The court has a lot of administrative duties as well. And I just want to continue the great work that we're doing on the Michigan Supreme Court.
All right, that's pretty good for 30 seconds. We'll give you time to elaborate a little bit more on that. Attorney Thomas, why do you want to leave those illustrious halls at the University of Michigan and academia to sit on a bench with some other colleagues, which sometimes could probably be unlike your classrooms?
Well, thank you for having me. I really care deeply about the quality of justice that people receive in our state, and I teach the practice of law, and so I think that what I would bring to the court is 25 years of legal experience as an attorney, lawyering in our state courts, from the district courts all the way to the Michigan Supreme Court, and the combination of research and academic rigor that I bring as a law professor at the University of Michigan Law School. So I think that combination of practical understanding of our court system and expertise in the law is really why I think I would be a great candidate.
Yeah. I'm curious to know, there's probably somebody out there watching and saying, okay, but they want to now be on the Michigan Supreme Court, and she hasn't been a judge in a lower court yet. Isn't that a big jump?
Yeah, so the majority of our justices actually didn't start as trial court judges. There's a real value in having justices on our state Supreme Court that have a range of experiences. Of course, Justice Bolden was a state legislator, and so bringing that range of experience, bringing that range of practice experience is really helpful to the decision making of a 7-member body, so that people can make sure that the court is seeing things from every perspective, that is really getting to the best answer possible. And so I think that what I bring would round out and add to the court's balance. Justice
Bolden, would you concur with that? Because you did a very similar thing. You went from the legislature to the highest court in this state. Has it been a big leap?
You know what's interesting? I started my career as a judicial law clerk. I did some court-appointed criminal defense work, but my career really started off as being a judicial law clerk, so doing the research and writing for a judge. And so it was actually more of a leap, a mental leap, to go to the legislature than for me to actually go back to my kind of judicial roots as far as my thought process. But I definitely agree with Professor Thomas. I think a wide range of experiences is really, really important.
The two of you are running as a team. You aren't necessarily running as individuals, even though on the ballot it's going to have you paired up with someone else. Tell me what came to that process to make you say, this is the way we want to go about this race. Attorney Thomas?
Well, I really am excited to run with Justice Bolden as a team. I think that these races are entirely separate races on people's ballot. And so I'm running for the open 8-year term, and Justice Bolden is running for the partial term, which is the remainder of the seat that she was appointed to.
Correct.
And I think that what we bring to the bench really complements each other. I think we have, different strengths, but that sort of excellence and integrity is core, but that we have different backgrounds. And I think that that combination really makes us a good team.
Justice Bolden, the same thing, because Attorney Thomas is correct. You ran for the position once before, got close, got within a whisker of it, didn't make it, but you had someone looking out for you, the governor of the state, Gretchen Whitmer. She appointed you, so now you have to officially run for that seat and get elected by the people.
Yes, and this is an exciting time. I get to come before the people once again, and I'm joined by Professor Thomas, who has been a wonderful partner in all of this, and I think it's really important to have a fair, functional court, and so I think it's important for Michiganders to see already the teamwork that's being done, but also different backgrounds and how that can really help the Michigan Supreme Court, different thought processes, but based in fairness, integrity, as well as empathy and compassion. And I think that this is a wonderful team, and we're doing everything that we can to let voters know who we are and why they should vote for us.
All right, we need to take a quick little break. We'll come right back. We'll talk about this nonpartisan race, which a lot of people say is anything but nonpartisan. We'll be right back. Stay with us. You have been nominated by the Michigan Democratic Party for a nonpartisan race. That confuses the heck out of a lot of voters out there. They say, well, how in the world is it nonpartisan? They just got nominated to this position by a very partisan organization. Do we need to change the system?
My position is that I am operating and we are operating under the rules that have been set forth by Michiganders. And so
But do you like the rules?
You know, what I think in that particular case, I don't know that it has very much weight. We're running by the rules that were set forth long before I was even considered, for running. And so if there's a different process, then we'll follow that process. And look, I have run for the position. I have been appointed to the position. Any way that you can try to be a Michigan Supreme Court justice, I have done. And so
from the Upper Peninsula down, right?
I mean, really. Right. And so, I don't have a preference. I really think it's up to the people what they believe is a fair process for people to be selected and nominated and who's on their ballot.
Sure. Attorney Thomas, same question, and I think what people are asking themselves with this system is, if they've been nominated by a political party, can they truly be nonpartisan when they get to that bench, if they get to that bench?
Yes, so I definitely think that I, as well as Justice Bolden, can be nonpartisan. And I think we can look around the country and see other systems of choosing Supreme Court justices, and those come under the same questions around partisanship. And so I'm not sure that it's the system by which we choose it. I think it's the actions of the justices once they get that office. Do they take that nonpartisanship seriously? Does that, in fact, have meaning in the way that they approach the work they're doing?
Before you all started running, did you really know each other well?
No, I've had the pleasure of getting to know Professor Thomas. I was a big supporter of her running for this position. It's not easy. It is not easy to run a statewide race, and she came into this very excited, willing to do the hard work, and I'm very, very fortunate to have a partner in her in running this Michigan Supreme Court race.
Mm-hmm. Attorney Thomas, what have you learned from Justice Bolden, who's already a member of the court?
Yeah, so I think I've learned a lot about running a race, making sure that I am out there, from Houghton to Monroe, really meeting the people of Michigan where they're at. And so I certainly have taken that advice and taken that to heart in running this. And I think that I'm really inspired by the work of the court. I think that there's a lot of important work that the court's engaged with, and I hope to be able to be her colleague.
Justice Kyra Harris Bolden and Kimberly Ann Thomas are the only choice for Michigan Supreme Court. Bolden, a seasoned justice and legal scholar with a track record of fairness and integrity, a justice for generations. Thomas, a legal expert, U of M law professor with 25 years experience as a litigator and working with kids in the court system, both dedicated to equal justice for all. Experience, integrity, fairness. Vote Justice Kyra Harris Bolden and Kimberly Ann Thomas for Michigan Supreme Court on the nonpartisan section of the ballot.
Of the endorsements that you've received, and there have been quite a few, which ones are you proudest of? Which ones make you say, I'm glad I got that endorsement?
Oh my goodness. So many, and honestly, I don't want to offend anyone. You can see all of our endorsements on boldenandthomas.com, where we have a joint website with all of our endorsements, and my website is boldenforjustice.com, and I know Professor Thomas has her own separate website as well. When I told my former judge, Judge John A. Murphy, that I was running for Michigan Supreme Court, he said, "That's perfect for you." And I think that motivation out of everything, having my former boss that knows my work ethic, that knows me in the capacity of a judicial law clerk, would think that I would be good for the Michigan Supreme Court. I think that's the best endorsement that I've received.
Okay, I need to take another quick little pause for the cause. We come back, I'm going to give you a chance to answer that as well. We'll be right back right after this. Attorney Thomas, same question. Of these endorsements, is there one that, or two, however many you want to cite, that you think getting that endorsement says a lot about who I am?
So for me, it's the endorsement of former Chief Justice Bridget Mary McCormick. So she and I taught together at the University of Michigan Law School before she went to the bench. She then went to the Michigan Supreme Court and became our Chief Justice. And what her endorsement tells me is that she understands the transition from being a teacher of law at the University of Michigan Law School, and she knows what that transition takes.
There's a flyer that's going to multiple households. I know it came to my household, so I assume it's going to thousands of others as well. It has both of your pictures on the front of it. And one of the key things it says on there is endorsed by Planned Parenthood Advocates of Michigan. Did you send out that leaflet, your campaign?
So my campaign, and I think I can speak for the both of us because we do have joint commercials, and so we work very closely together. We have not sent out any literature as a part of our campaign. So if you look at the paid for by on any of your literature, you'll be able to see who sent that to you.
The U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. Was that a very good, wise decision by those justices in Washington, D.C.?
So I will not speak to anything that the U.S. Supreme Court does. We here in Michigan, we have our own constitution. We have our own methods of selecting our justices, and here we have an opportunity to choose our justices, whereas the justices on the U.S. Supreme Court are appointed and they'll be there for life. And so I think it's important that in Michigan, at least, we have an accountability measure through our elections to choose your judges and justices in Michigan. And so I would like to be judged on the decisions that I make, the opinions that I've authored, the things that I've dissented in and concurred in, the task forces that I work on, and my work in the community as a barometer to whether I should keep this position.
As judicial candidates, we can't weigh in on issues that might become before the court. So certainly we would apply the law.
You can give them signals sometimes.
And I think that, voters should and I really encourage voters to inform themselves about what my background experiences are, what Justice Bolden's background and experience are, to inform themselves about the decision they make for the court, and of course to complete their ballot so that their votes are heard in this race. And so really encouraging voters to get what information that's out there that they want to, that's important to them. Lots of different voters care about lots of different issues, and so really an informed voter is the best thing that we can do. And so
All right, we're going to take a little break. We'll come right back with the final segment right after this. Do you see your role, if elected to the Michigan Supreme Court, in your case, if retained on the Michigan Supreme Court, to make the laws or interpret the laws? Justice Bolden.
Well, having been in the legislature, I take separation of powers very seriously. In the legislature, we would obviously be upset if judges would step out and try to make the laws. That is not the job of the judiciary. That is the job of the legislatures to make the laws. Our job at the Michigan Supreme Court and as judges and justices is to interpret the law, because the legislature, as profound as they try to be, can't contemplate every single case or scenario in a particular statute or in the state constitution. Sometimes what the legislature writes is a bit ambiguous, and people are confused about the actual meaning or interpretation, and that's where the judiciary branch comes in. We try to interpret in those gaps when we have particular cases that it may not be apparent, right? That's why people come to the courts, to get those things resolved. And so I take it very, very seriously that there is not legislating from the bench. And I think you will be able to see, if you go to the Michigan Supreme Court website and read some of my concurrences or even dissents, where I say that while this is a very important issue, this is best to the legislature to decide.
Mm-hmm. Professor Thomas, those running against you look at this court, and many people believe now that this court leans Democratic by a slight majority of 4-3, and they believe that this court has been about overreach in terms of the law. Do you agree or disagree with that, and how would you interpret the law?
Yeah, so I disagree with that. I think that the court's job is to apply the laws that exist. Obviously the people of Michigan express their desires through their state legislators, through their constitution, and the Michigan Supreme Court or the other courts, their job is to apply those laws, and as Justice Bolden mentioned, when there are questions about what that law means, to try to resolve those questions based on the text of the law, the precedents of the court. I teach law students, and that's where you have to start as a law student learning. You have to look at the text of the law, and then you have to know what prior decisions of the court meant, and you have to comply with those prior decisions.
Our electoral system has been under attack, certainly for the last 4 years. Justice Bolden, was President Biden a duly elected president of these United States, or was the system rigged?
Well, I think after a fair election and after many court cases, it was determined that Joe Biden won the 2020 election. And even I served in the Michigan House at the time, and there was a report that came out from the legislature that was led by the Senate that said that there was no fraud. And so at least I can speak to that piece of what evidence has come out, what the Senate at the time has stated, what our court cases have determined, and that Joe Biden did win the 2020 election. You
feel as though the judicial system and the electoral system worked the way it was supposed to?
I think that everyone had a say. Anyone that had, a challenge, it went to the courts. That's where it was resolved. And I don't think that there was any separate resolution other than Joe Biden won the 2020 election through the fair electoral process and through any challenges of the courts.
Professor Thomas, your chance to answer that, because I would imagine you've gotten a whole lot of questions about that from your students.
So really, I think it comes down to the rule of law. Like the final decisions of the courts on a question of law are what we all have to abide by, right? Though that's the final word. And sometimes those decisions people agree with, people don't agree with, but we have to have a system of laws where we all, once that legal decision is made, we all comply with it. That's how our court system works. And so really, once there's a final legal decision, once there's a determination, then we have to live with that. That's how the rule of law system works. And so that's the system we live under. It's a system that's really important to uphold, that legal decisions bind everyone, no matter who you are.
Final question. What are you proudest of as you look back at your career, or what has been perhaps the biggest challenge that you've learned something from?
2022 was my most difficult year, and having a full-time job in the legislature, running a statewide race, and being pregnant with my first child, having my child on the campaign trail, not at an actual event, but you know, we were concerned.
Right.
And just the whirlwind of losing the election and being appointed and starting a new job. I think I have learned a lot about balance, or I should say juggling, you know, what it means to be a new mom, what it means to be on the Michigan Supreme Court, and how important and profound this job is. And I think most importantly, I truly understand what it means to have justice for generations. The decisions that we make on the Michigan Supreme Court won't just affect the people that are here today, but they set a precedent that will affect generations to come. That means my daughter, and that means your grandchildren and your children's children will have to adhere to the way that we apply the law. And I take that with me every day. I think it's very, very important.
Okay. Professor Thomas, same question.
So I think the thing that I would say that I'm proudest of is really teaching the next generation of lawyers. So I've been at the University of Michigan Law School for about 20 years. I have, work with someone who is really nervous about being a lawyer, is really wondering if they can do it, and to see them grow in their confidence, to see them be able to read the law, to be able to do the research that's necessary, to work with and understand the rules of professional conduct that apply to lawyers, and to see them sort of begin to flourish in our profession. That's what I'm most proud of.
All right. Professor Kimberly Ann Thomas and Justice Kyra Harris Bolden, thank you so much for coming in, joining us today in Spotlight. Good luck on the campaign trail.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Next week, meet Michigan Supreme Court candidates Andrew Fink and Patrick William O'Grady. Their interviews have already been conducted. All of the candidate interviews will live on WXYZ.com under Spotlight on the News. I'm Chuck Stokes. Have a good week.